and welcome to this Money Monday edition of Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. I'm John Tobacco, and what a week we have in store. It is week 14. Is that right, Frankie? Week 14 of Liquid Lunch, and this week we're going 2 hours, so we're going to double your pleasure. We'll come to you live as we do every day, Monday to Friday, from Newsmax headquarters high atop Midtown Manhattan. And of course, we are always from noon to 2 Eastern now in the Question Tequila Studios. And downtown in Manhattan at the New York Stock Exchange, the market's still trying to shake off some of those global fears from last week. China tariffs, China trade, all this stuff has been weighing on the markets, uncertainty going into the end of the summer. And just let me tell you this, it's been like a cardio patient's EKG the last couple weeks. The market's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. Stay calm. If you're smart and you've been watching this show, you know you invested in things you know about. You've invested for the long term. And if you start reacting every day to different geopolitical fears, it's going to take up too much of your time. You're going to be doing things that you shouldn't be doing. So stay calm. You're invested for the long term and the right reasons. And Trump economy has been doing well. It's going to stabilize here as soon as we figure out this geopolitical stuff. And end of summer is a very, very thin time in the markets. Bitcoin holding above 11,000, and I think we're in a good path there, good pattern, developing some support here at 11,000. And joining me, as he does every day, is Frank Morano, my co-host and managing editor. And joining us in the leadoff spot today is Richard Stratton. And Richard Stratton has some very unique insights for us on the news of the weekend, probably the week, and it will perpetuate itself even more. Jeffrey Epstein on suicide watch, not on suicide watch, dead, not dead. None of these questions are answered. And Richard, you spent 3 years in the MCC as a federal prisoner.
3 years in the MCC, and most of it on that same unit that Epstein was on. So I know that place too well. So
we see, you know, pictures where there's a bed and a desk and these diagrams and everything. When people are in that special housing unit, they call it the SHU, I think. Are there sheets on the beds?
Well, not if you're on suicide watch. If you're on suicide watch, there's no sheets, no towels, nothing you could possibly hang yourself with.
You have pants on? Can you take your pants off?
They have like a smock that they give you. I mean, I've never had that experience, but from what I know, that you have a smock and you have guards stationed outside the cell 24 hours a day watching you to make sure you don't kill yourself.
And some of these, I understand some of these rooms are outfitted with cameras, but apparently he was in one that wasn't.
I've never seen the cameras in the MCC, but it's possible. I mean, look, the thing is that we're probably never going to know what happened. It's just like with the death of Whitey Bulger, who was beaten to death in a prison cell shortly after he was transferred. When something like that happens within the Bureau of Prisons, there is no way we'll ever know the truth of what happened in that institution. Because of all of the federal bureaucracies, the most impenetrable is the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
So, Richard, let's talk about that. So you mentioned the Whitey Bulger incident where an 89-year-old gangster happened to be shipped off to prison with one of his criminal rivals and then shockingly ends up beaten to death. Now we see Jeffrey Epstein dead, apparently of a suicide watch. Even after a suicide attempt, there are reports now that he was actually taken off suicide watch. Having been in the MCC yourself, one, who makes that determination whether or not someone's on suicide watch or not? And two, once you're on suicide watch, aside from the different clothing accoutrement that you referenced, what is different? Are there more regular check-ins? Do they give you a shorter cell that you can't hang yourself with? What's different once you're on suicide watch, and who determines whether you're on suicide watch or not?
Well, who determines would be the Bureau of Prisons staff that run the place. But
does it go up to the warden? Is the warden the person that makes the decision?
Goes up to the warden, but the warden is getting his instructions from someone higher up in the Bureau of Prisons. Look, with a guy like Epstein, this is a high-profile prisoner of the highest level. So they're watching every aspect of his incarceration from the moment he walks into that institution until they take him out on a stretcher. That's, you know, look, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I'm going to tell you right now, to me, it stinks of a hit. The guy was whacked. He was intentionally killed. just like Whitey Bulger.
You think he's dead, but you believe the narrative that he's absolutely dead.
As opposed to in a
As
coma?
opposed to, no,
Being
well, if they find him in
hidden
his
away
cell and he's
somewhere?
hung himself of an apparent suicide, as they say, and then they perform life-saving measures on him and continue, as they say, if he's dead, then they call the ME and they bring him out in a body bag and they bring him to the morgue. Apparently,
Supposedly.
Apparently, they put him in an ambulance and they took him to New York Presbyterian Hospital, and you see him being wheeled in without any life-saving measures on him. So, did they get him to the hospital and then swap him out, or you believe he's dead? Why do you bring a dead guy to a hospital? They go to morgues.
Exactly. Except maybe because they needed someone to pronounce him dead, some doctor or something. I don't know. I mean, why couldn't they do that at the MCC?
Well, so
You know, John, these are the kinds of questions that are going to come up in this case over and over and over again, and we're never going to get the real story.
So, Richard, obviously Jeffrey Epstein and his case have gotten so much attention, not only because the nature of his plea deal in Florida, but because he counts 2 presidents as former friends of his, in addition to royalty, in addition to some of the wealthiest people in the world, some of the top-level politicians
Governor
in the whole
Richardson.
country, in both parties. So you have a situation where, if, let's say what you say is true, that this wasn't a result of incompetence or negligence on the part of the BOP, but maybe something intentional, how would that work? Does a CO get paid off by someone to turn a blind eye to someone going into the prison? Being familiar with not only the BOP bureaucracy, but the MCC itself, logistically, how would a hit work?
You know, as in any hit, there's a lot of different scenarios, but I would have to say that the orders came down from above that this guy is not going to walk out of here. He's going out either in a body bag or in a coma. And look, the guards who work in these institutions, they are the opposite side of the same coin of the guys that are in those prisons. They're tough guys. They're badasses. They don't take shit, excuse me, from anybody. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But the fact of the matter is that the people who work in the Bureau of Prisons, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, is the most impenetrable of federal bureaucracies. And they're maintained, the reason they maintain that is because they have custody of the most dangerous people in the world, which is true. They have the
El Chapos, the terrorists,
the terrorists, the mob bosses. They have custody of these people.
You would think after El Chapo, this is like the most important witness person in federal custody, because he's had so many connections to presidents and royalty and governors and everything else. How could it be? I mean, my father was a cop, and we've all seen some of this stuff romanticized, that, you know, the guard turns this way and they bring the guy out into the... But something happened here.
So, Richard, it is possible, though, that this was just incompetence on the part of the BOP, not intentional and willful allowing him to be murdered, right?
Look, with someone as high profile as that, no.
No,
I don't
it's not.
think so. No. I don't believe it for a minute. You know, I mean, look, if it was some run-of-the-mill prisoner that nobody really knew much about.
Right, but not the most watched prisoner in the world.
You are, of course, the author of Kingpin, among other great reads. And one of the reasons you're the author of Kingpin is because you're one of the world's most infamous drug smugglers, and you spent a heck of a lot of time in federal custody. When you were in, did you guys ever hear, like, hey, stay away from this cell block, or just watch out because there's going to be some action here? And, like, is there like an undercurrent inside where people know what's happening?
Absolutely. There totally is exactly what goes on. But in this instance, he was not in communication with other prisoners. He's in isolation, so he can't get any feedback from what's going on in the institution. He is in solitary confinement, and the only people he has contact with are the guards, staff. That's it.
And the staff kind of just turned the other cheek at some point, you think?
Either turn the other cheek, or, I mean,
Got some orders.
Got some orders to. Let's not have this guy walk out of here.
Richard, we've seen the Bulger murder. We've seen the death of Mr. Epstein. We've seen Ronell Wilson, a cop killer, being able to father children with, or a child with the CO that was ostensibly guarding him. We've seen instances of Bureau of Prison officials covering up other inmate deaths. We've seen scandal after scandal. What needs to be done at the BOP in order to reform this agency? It seems like whether this is intentional or just incompetence, that there is a real problem with the people running the federal prison system. What would you do differently?
Well, that's a matter of perspective. Is it a problem, or is it running smoothly?
I would say it's a problem.
When they want to get rid of somebody like Whitey Bulger, they do it. When they want to get rid of somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, they do it.
Well,
I think it's running very well, running smoothly as far as they're concerned. Nobody escapes.
Bill Barr's Justice Department just reinstated the death penalty, capital punishment for one thing in particular, people who have done harm to young underage children. So many would say that, Epstein did the Department of Prisons work for the Bureau of Prisons work for him by killing himself. But others would say that, his victims get no justice. And if somebody killed him, it's another in a long line of bodies laying behind the Clintons.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of a reach to pin
That's
it
what other
right
people
on the
have
Clintons.
said. I'm not pinning it on anyone.
I heard Joe Scarborough ready to blame Donald Trump and Russia over the weekend.
Well, I saw a photo this weekend of someone that looked like Hillary with like a mustache and glasses, and apparently that was the last visitor that Epstein had got. So, I'm just going by what the internet is telling me.
Well, the shame of it is, even if he was going to take a plea here, we'll never know the full magnitude of his co-conspirators and who else was responsible in exploiting all of these young girls, and that's the real shame of it.
That is the real shame of it. We'll never know the truth.
And I think as long as we don't get some straight answers on this stuff, and, there's all this, well, did he go to a hospital? Was he dead? What was the cause of death? 2 days later, we still don't have a cause of death. They need more information, apparent suicide. There's a lot of jockeying going on in the deep state and behind the scenes right now to try to create the right story. And I think that foments things in people's heads. I want to thank Richard Stratton, always making himself available to us. Go out and check out his book, Kingpin, which tells you what a forerunner he was, what an innovative guy, because he was selling pot before the government and everybody else realized it was legal. You're one of the godfathers of the marijuana trade. You were ahead of your time. We're just about out of time. Coming up next is Jeff Webb. He's the founder of Varsity Brands and also the chairman and founder of New American Populist. Right after this.